Where we at?
I
Snipping.
mean, you're pretty tapped on resources, if I recall correctly.
Ollers, fuck no. I saved a lot of my spell slots. I didn't use a lot of my spell slots. I stood in there and tanked a bunch of shit. It's my health that
Nah,
is
that's a good
totally
choice.
fucking shot. I remember I was the yo-yo because I wouldn't burn any kind of smites or anything, so I go up and down and up and down and up and down. And they were like, basically, they both sent me messages at one point. They're like, just don't burn your, like, you're gonna have to burn Malik. We're gonna have to stay back, and like, we're not gonna be able to get close enough anyways. So I said, cool.
I mean, it was nice to see Uller kill a boss for once.
Hell yeah, it was. I'm good. Like, that's the funny part. Like, I get messages from time to time from they who shall not be named. Like, how is it going? And I don't have the heart to tell them, like, hey man, like, none of us were worried about, like, none of us sweated when Zareth went down. There wasn't a bit of panic in the party. We were just like, that sucks. We're going to figure that out. That was it. It was like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. And it's such a weird dichotomy. Like, we were in a shit, like, that fight it's just a shit fight. It just was what it was. And it happens. It's okay. But, like, there was just, like, this different level of, like, unpanicked control because no one was going, oh god, oh no, oh god. So, like, it was so weird to just, like, know we're coming together, and it's just like, Gwen wasn't painfully awkward. No one really, like Gwen even changed up because they asked me, like, what could I work on? I don't want to be a Sylvie. I said, know what you're doing with your turret, just get it out and be quick. Hey, these two, like, so we put the aura around the turret, so now anybody who's in the aura just knows that they're getting, so they can just be like, turret's putting out health, this and this. And it's on us to go look at it. If you're near the turret and you don't take the HP, that's on you. Don't slow the game down, don't be weird. Gwen was like, yeah, I fucking got that. So even, like, Gwen was operable and it was awesome. It was just like, don't get me wrong. I'm going to send Zareth a message tomorrow. It's like, if you're not here next week, I'm going to punch you in the balls.
No joke.
But, like,
oh yeah, I need to get with him and ask for fucking the 70% payment for the last 2 sessions. Keep forgetting to do that.
Like, respect, just like, we're gonna need you. Because if not, to a point, it's like, hey, if you're not gonna be here for a bunch of stuff, we need to fill someone in. Like, we gotta find somebody.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially entering T3, we're gonna want to have a full party all the time.
As much as we can. So
a fucking Sunday game at $10 a head is popping off with 6 players now.
That's awesome.
That seems like normally you have to break laws to make that kind of money.
No, they're just. Here's the funny part. They're just gonna they're gonna expect all the people to be there at $10 a game, at $10 a head. Our response is gonna be, if you don't show up and you fuck me on my 40, 50, 60 bucks in this game, I'm gonna be a little fucking salty. So we're all gonna, like, they're all gonna be professional to each other, or they're gonna be ruthless and making it professional for each other.
It's like a car payment per month.
It's just like, hey, we're gonna be professional. We're gonna do this thing. I respect that. So,
well, streams live. Let's go ahead and kick this off if you're ready.
Hey, let's do it.
So, Adriel, you have been summoned once again to the side of King Brunor Battlehammer. You find yourself in a small council chamber in Kandrakar. The Dwarfheim has at this point been restored to some of its former glory. Smith's hammers ringing in the deep, the warmth of forges heating the grave cold stone of the mountain, and for the first time in decades, the Dwarfheim echoes with song. The histories of its people recovered, the techniques of Durgadin the Black have had new life breathed into them. Yet, this is not the end. You know that deeper beneath the mountain lies the great city of Gauntylgrym, in the forge of the fire elemental Megara, that Brunor Battlehammer seeks to reclaim. Currently, though, you sit at an impasse. King Brunor, Snervain, Namira, and curiously, Miria Tirenval all sit in council together. You are the last to arrive. Korana ethereally a claw upon your shoulder as you step into the room. You can hear the sounds of ongoing discussion already. As Miria Tirenval sits with her fingers steepled, looking at an increasingly irate Brunor Battlehammer, as she says, "Noble as your attempts to reclaim your ancestors' heritage may be, there is an essential problem, which is that you wish to cross the territory of House Tirenval to do it. How am I to explain to my peers, to my rivals, to my minions, that I have offered you charity in this task? Certainly you understand how much face I would lose in recompense." You can see that Namira and Snervain sit, white knuckles gripping the stone chairs assembled around the table, sprawling maps of the Underdark laid out before them all. King Brunor clears his throat and says, "Well, it's not charity that we would expect from dark elves such as yourselves, but I was under the impression that some sort of deal could be made for fine dwarvish steel, for strength of arms, magical lore, histories. You understand that the vaults of the mountain dwarves overflow with such things." Miria Tirenval looks back to him and says, "Overflow with worthless trinkets your vaults might, yet I assure you, the might of House Tirenval has reigned long without such demeaning alliances. I'm afraid you'll have to offer me better, more." It's about that time that you step in, King Brunor immediately rising to greet you, saying, "Ah, Dawnforger, I had hoped that you might arrive soon. It seems that our expedition is reaching an impasse before it even steps out." He gestures toward Miria and says, "We need the dispensation of this one in order to return to the lands rightfully owned by my forebears. You, have an alliance, I understand. Something of a friendship." Although he shoots Miria a cutting glance as he says that. She says, "A friendship is perhaps too generous of a description, but..." She looks you up and down and says, "We have worked together in the past, and I do owe your friend here a measure of gratitude for helping me avenge myself against my sister and restore the Temple of the Spider to its proper glory." Hadriel, as you step into this council, what do you do?
Stepping in with probably a demeanor that is something that they're not used to, just more of a chaotic comfort and understanding as the past months have been difficult in the journey. Miria, upon saying we work together, I would look at her and say, "Yes, that we do have an understanding, Miria. Your sister was none too gentle with our last encounter, but I am glad that she no longer stands in the way. I hope you find peace and power with you and your mother. You'll have to update me on where that has gone. As for you, Brunor, you told me to return upon the completion of my last task, and I am glad to see some of the fires restarted here. But I am sure you're about to notify me of something more difficult for this adventure.
He looks toward you and says, difficulty, perhaps. From my conversations with the Lady Tyrnvol, though, I do suspect, given her secrecy in your absence, that she will be the one to offer you difficulties. She looks toward the rest of the council and says, indeed, dwarf kin I have no love or trust for, but Sir Adriel has served me faithfully in the past, and if, as you say, he is to be a member of your expedition, I would prefer to barter with him, someone I can see eye to eye with without having to crane my neck downwards. You can see Namira speaks up and says, hold your tongue in the presence of... But King Brunor cuts her off with a sudden movement of his hand. Snervain just chuckles at the jibe. King Brunor looks toward her and says, my lady, we did not come here to trade insults, but information, possibilities. If you would deign to speak in the presence of those as lowly as ourselves, then I beg you, I bid you, please inform us of what this service is that you require. She looks toward Adriel and says, Don Forger, you cast your lot in with these beardlings? For what purpose? To what end?
Upon asking that question, Adriel symbolically takes off kind of the gloving and gauntlet to expose a bare hand, walking over to Snervain, shaking his hand, nodding to an old friend, and then walking to Brunor and taking that unsheathed hand and kind of bumping it over his heart to salute the dwarf king, I apologize, and looks at Miria and says, celestial as I might have heritage from, I was not but born of them. I grew up in a small dwarven town far from the Sword Coast, taken in by an old craftsman who taught me patience. I would say kindness, but you know the dwarves. But the thing they taught me most is the ability to stand at the edge of a fire and not blink. So when they call, I hadn't family before. An old dwarf took me in, and I find another dwarf asking for my help. So my lot goes when they call.
Indeed. And as they have called upon me, I shall call upon you, as I have in the past. She looks toward King Brunor, looks toward the rest of the assembled council, and says, and then back to you and says, So Adriel, are all of those in presence your trusted confidants? I speak on business that is integral to House Tyrnvol's security, to our pride, to our continued dominance within Minzo Bronzen.
Looking at Miria, I nod and say, everyone here has been willing to give their life for, or to, or lead a cause I hold dear. Miria, if I'm honest, even though we may philosophically see the world differently, in one of my hardest times, you had my back when you saw others could not and fell on the battlefield. So there's no one here I wouldn't trust with my life.
She considers it for a moment and says, "Trust is not a word that I frequently use. Raised in the ways of Loth and her deceptions, yet you have held my life in your palm before, and you chose not to crush it. That, at the very least, must be repatriated for my own pride's sake." "Very well." She looks toward King Brunor and says, "The territories of House Tyrannval, you wish to travel through them. Such a thing might be negotiable during other times, yet as it currently stands, you are not the only trespassers within my mother's dominion. Most recently, we have faced the incursion of Illithid." You see a shudder involuntarily run up Snurvane's Dweragar back, Namira's knuckles clenching even whiter against the stone of the throne upon which she sits. King Brunor simply picks at his beard and says, "Naturally. Mind flayers. Underdark is riddled with such filthy things." She says, "Indeed. And if these were Illithid of a common caste, I assure you..." She says, "I assure you that they would be easily dispatched with. We have hunters for such a thing, yet these are no common Illithid." She looks toward Adriel and says, "If my sources tell me truly, then I believe that you have some experience with navigating the phaserus of the Underdark. Some battle experience, specifically with the creatures that it spawns."
I do. I just recently came back from fighting through some of the origins of the Phaserus in a smaller part of the Sword Coast. Though I get the feeling he wasn't the purveyor of it, he was just an abuser.
Miria says, "The source of Phaserus is something that has been debated by scholars for more than a century now. It is not its source that we are interested in. What frightens me is the way it has been recently harnessed." She says, "You have encountered the sorcerer Malik. He fell in battle to you once, perhaps again if your luck holds out. Yet, I'm afraid to tell you that he is neither the only nor the most powerful wielder of these strange chemicals that have so recently begun to bedevil Tyrannval territory." She says, "There is a creature, an elder brain." She looks toward Adriel and says, "Are you familiar with the concept?"
Only recently I've become familiar with it.
She says, "Indeed. Intellect unsurpassed, cunning comparable to my own, and a will to dominate that would put all the children of Loth to shame. The creature is called Zai Zivath. It rules over a colony known as Vergenzolt. Until times in the recent past, we have had not friendly, but diplomatic dealings with the Illithid. providing them with thralls in exchange for knowledge. We have never troubled each other militarily, yet within the past 20 days, many a trade caravan, many a diplomatic entourage, and even the group of surface-dwelling adventurers that I sent to investigate their fate have disappeared. I heard the words of a garbled sending from one of the individuals that I hired, babbling on about Phaserus affected creatures and the plans of the Mind Flayers. Nothing intelligible, I assure you, but the sense of urgency was communicated. She says, pressed as hard as we are upon all sides by these creatures, I do not see that there is any fit way to allow other outsiders such as yourselves to trespass upon our territories until this current diplomatic crisis is handled. And Brunor Battlehammer speaks up and says, and by handled, I take it to mean. Miria looks back and says, well, I'm certain that you know how the children of Lolth handle their enemies. She looks toward Adriel and says, I would trust none other with this task, Dawn Forger. And if indeed you have thrown your lot in with these short-statured creatures, then it seems that our interests may be aligned once again.
Nodding, I kind of look at Miria and say, you know, one thing you learn about the dwarves as you kind of grow with them, somebody of my size has room for a whole lot of other emotions. Dwarves really just have no room for anything other than hate. They are prepared, so if this is a problem for them, it's a problem for me. And if it's a problem for you, as much as I don't love Mind Flayers, sounds like it becomes a problem for me too.
Indeed. A simple one. From what I have seen, it is the simple problems that you deal with most effectively. The task is as follows. I do not wish to risk any more of my people, nor their enmity toward me as their leader, in our pursuit of pacifying these Illithid. I wish for you to travel to Vergenzolt, find the Elder Brain itself, Zai Zivath, and put an end to it. Simple enough, even for you.
I've yet to meet an Elder Brain in person, Miria, so I can't say a simple task it'll be. I can say I stand here because I haven't met failure much.
Karana grips your shoulder. That ethereal claw, capable of touching you even here thanks to the pact that you hold with her. She says, Adriel, I have seen you encounter with many a ferocious beast, yet I do not think that you fully understand the dangers of the intellect of such a creature. A single thought may flay your ego. A single intention may crush your body. You are powerful in many ways, yes, but, and I do not mean this offensively, but the sanctity of your mind has never been entirely intact.
Kind of nodding, agreeing. I have kind of always been one with a heavy hand, not with depth of thought, but it occurs to me that I may have to get right with a new way to deal with combat moving forward. The more I learn of this world, the more I learn the sharp edge of a sword can only manage so much, can only carry me through combat so far. And I will spend time working, learning, researching, and then in our own hopes, ending an elder brain.
You can feel her nodding, an inch or so away from your ear, as she whispers, "Remember, subtlety cuts deeper than any sword. Malice bites deeper than any claw. I remember our sister, the Lady Tyranval, is an ample possession of both. I do not think that she would think twice about seeing you as a disposable tool in this task."
But I also believe that were it just me versus a colony of Illithid, she, I will hope, can grant aid or help. I am but one soul. I don't hunger for her power. I don't want her spider temple. If this elder brain, if these Illithid do cause this much of an issue, I probably am the lesser of two evils for her.
Brunor looks toward you and says, "Sir Adriel, you seem deep in thought. I know that you have pledged yourself to me and my service, yet I would be remiss in ordering you to pledge yourself to hers. If you're not meet to this task, and there's no reason that a sane being should be, we will find another way." As he looks meaningfully toward Miria and says, "A diplomatic solution, or otherwise."
Taking a second, Brunor, the concern isn't of my sanity. I don't think anybody sane gets to the power that you wield without taking a risk or two. And through your history, you have reinvented yourself. For truth, you have died and come back. So for this task,
it was just a little death.
just a little death. For this task alone, I claim myself to be a hero. What kind of hero would I be if I wasn't willing to stare down an abnormally large brain? I mean, it can't even hold a sword. How bad can it be?
Snurvane lets out a soot-choked laugh and says, "Worry not, my liege. A hero he is. Otherwise he would not bear the blade that I had forged for him." He looks toward you and says, "How has it served you, lad? That Furbolg friend of yours still kicking around, in it?"
Luckily, no. He's in a Warforged body at this point, so he is not. He's no longer living inside of it.
Warforged. Never thought of him as much more than golems too smart for their own good. Never liked a construct that knows how to talk back. You're decent folks, though. If he's ever looking for any upgrades, you point him in my direction.
I'm sure he will be. He's, somehow his druidic form has taken over it. Places you'd find hair in a dwarf. He's got peat moss. Feels unnatural.
Unnatural, indeed. How does a moss even grow upon metal?
He's not metal. He's, almost an ancient wood.
Snurvane stops for a moment, completely, not even a facial muscle moving a tick, as he looks toward King Brunor and says, "My liege, would you excuse me from your presence for a moment?" King Brunor says, "As you will, Forge Master. Attend to your duties." You hear him nod very solemnly, step to the entrance of the council chamber, and then you hear a scream that turns into sounds of vomiting from the other side. And give me just 2 seconds here.
Take your time.
Sorry. King Brunor looks toward you and says, "Well, Sir Don Forger, if this is a task that you will shoulder for yourself, I promise you, you shall not go unrewarded for it. Any support that the dwarves of Delzoun may offer, you shall have." He says, "But our people look toward you to captain this task."
Nodding. I think we're here now. I mean, well, what else would I do? Turn back? Have a normal life in Neverwinter? Shop? Garden? I don't even know who I am without a sword.
He looks toward you and says, "Aye, and every man upon whom the crown of kingship has rested speaks much the same. I see true steel in your backbone. I hope that it is tempered, not broken, by the tasks which you face." Miria cuts in and says, Yes. The oaths of beardlings, the repetitions of family honor and clan and name. I'm certain you shall all have plenty of time for that, yet mine is much more valuable," she says, looking toward Adriel. "If the task is acceptable, then shall we get down to business?"
Let's get down to that business, Miria.
So, Adriel, upon the maps of the Underdark before you, she points out an area some 100 miles or so away from the great seat of Loth's children, Minzo Baranzan, that citadel within the deep from which most drow hail. She shows you the tunnels that could be taken from the Temple of the Spider toward this location, and tells you that she would be more than happy to teleport you and up to 6 companions to the Temple of the Spider, where you will be well provisioned before setting out on your trek. The trek itself is one through dangerous territory. Naturally, the perils of the Underdark are something that you are well acquainted with, yet beyond that even, there is the dominions of Vergenzalt and the Elder Brain, Zai Zavith itself. What creatures may lurk within it, she does not know. Scrying interrupted by the flow of Phasris, the reports that she has received from the previous party of adventurers, which she says a pack of dogs known as the Moon Whisperers. Useless, though ultimately expendable, their loss nothing great, were unintelligible. She requests that you make whatever preparations are necessary within the next 24 hours. And after that, she will be happy to convey you and whatever party you've chosen to the Temple of the Spider. Beyond that, the trek, the journey, and the task is your own to lead. She expects that the trek from the Temple of the Spider could be 10 days, could be 40. It depends on how effectively you navigate the Underdark and how much difficulties you'll face in the progress.
All right, 6 people, Underdark. Trek's gonna suck. And that doesn't even include what I'm gonna have to deal with once I get to this settlement, encampment. Do we know if it's...
Colony would be the proper word.
So it's established in its existence.
Certainly so.
And from there, find the Elder Brain within the colony. Remove it from power. And just come back to you, or do they have something you're looking for?
She says, the termination of the Elder Brain is of greatest importance. She says, though naturally, if you find any treasures, any histories in possession of the Illithid, well, the treasuries of House Tyranval run deep. And you have dealt fairly with me in the past. I hope that you would trust me to do the same with you. King Brunor cuts in and says, Aye, though not more deeply than run the treasuries of old Dilzoon. Don Forger, I shall not command you, but should you find anything of interest, I will trust to your discretion that it finds its way into the right hands.
Hearing both of them almost emotionally bidding for the return of history and what happens. Not wanting to kick up political issue, I will just nod to them both understandingly and say, okay, what I can carry back, I shall. And if it's something as small as just getting out with proof that Brain has fallen, I will be happy to do so as well.
Miria says, proof I do not think will be necessary. The destruction of the Elder Brain should have immediate effects upon the tenuousness of the colony. The mind flayers underneath its control will be confused, weakened, disconnected from each other. Should this creature fall, I suspect it will become immediately apparent to my scouts, my warriors, my diplomats.
Then we shall bring it down in combat.
Very good. I am glad to hear that you are still useful in that way. She stands abruptly and says, with a very sarcastic expression, toward King Brunor, my liege. And then back toward you, Adriel, with less of a hint of sarcasm, and says, I shall take my leave, then. I grow tired of listening to the rough accents of dwarven kind, though, if you have questions for me, I bid you ask them now. Your survival is of utmost concern to me.
Is there anything that you're... How do I put this? Is there anything in your forward representation, your diplomats, your scouts, Is there anything that they could tell me about finding a less ran way in? Minimal interaction with mind flayers, the ability to get closer faster would be of great value. And if they've had any success with the combat nature of the Illithid, or any enchantment or magical item that would help prevent them from creating chaos within a mind, I am always willing to hear.
She looks toward you and says, regarding these specific defenses around Vergenzolt, I cannot say. Illithid colonies are well warded against scrying, and even the efforts of our most talented arcanists has been foiled by the interference of the phasers. What defenses await you, I cannot say, though when it comes to slaying Illithid, well, there's a reason I thought of you for the task. Strike first, strike powerfully. For the moment that their psionics begin to creep into your mind, you will find yourself in their thrall. There are, of course, precautions that can be taken. Say, an amulet of proof against detection, a ring of mind shielding, a scroll of intellect fortress, or, though she casts a cutting look toward King Brunor, I doubt that any of these steel-obsessed runesmiths would be capable of casting a mind blank spell. Such things are tremendously useful. She says, yet, as I've said, the vaults of House Tiranval shall not be opened to this expedition. We offer much, even for the clemency to pass through our territory. I would see you call upon your own allies, your own resources, in order to procure what you must. The fact that I shall feed you and guide you is charity enough.
I would nod, knowing that we being I, have returned to my possession an amulet of protection. Finding that to be a fortuitous acquisition, I would agree. Most dwarves find magic in their weapons, not in their spells. It occurs to me pretty clearly that I probably should bring someone with a strong arcane background to accompany me into this darkness.
She says, wise, indeed. You know that the purview of my spell casting is divine in nature, yet the Illithids fear no god. Indeed, they are older than any of them. A powerful arcanist may be a powerful ally.
Sorry, you cut out on that last part.
Oh, she says that a powerful arcanist may be a powerful ally.
Yes. I can swing a sword, I can swing a hammer. My magic control is specific. It is not unclear, but unfortunately, past my own amulet, I don't know. We'll have to find other ways to hide a party to get close.
She says, indeed, in that sense, allies may be as great an impediment as they are a boon. I leave it to your sense of professionalism, consummate as it is, in order to discern what you require for this journey. She says, I have sendings to make, arrangements to see to, if I am to gather 40 days of food for a fair-skinned angel from the larders of the Temple of the Spider. I hope you like mushrooms.
More than spiders, but I don't know if that says a whole lot.
She chuckles a little bit and begins to make her leave unless you have further questions for her.
I cannot think of any off the top of my head.
In that case, Adriel, just to recap, the information about your objective, scanty as it is, as follows. You need to travel to Vergenzolt, either you or a party of your choosing. The trek, as she said, may take 10 days, may take 40, depending upon how ably you navigate the passages of the Underdark. Once there, you must locate the Elder Brain Zai Zivath within the mists of Phaedrus and eliminate it. A simple task, though a daunting one. King Brunor looks toward you and says, "All the swords of Kondrakar at your beck and call, Dawn Forger. We look to your wisdom in this." So, what preparations do you need to make? What allies do you need to gather?
Not that it super matters, but this is a above table question.
Mm-hmm.
Would I have had time during my downtime between leaving Malik Slayer and Neverwinter to stop in Neverwinter and to get the 2 stones that Nervain was looking for?
Yes, you would have enough time, assuming you've got about 1,000 GP with which to procure them. If you were looking to just purchase these or source them.
I would probably send a party to source one of them, so whatever that cost would be, I will pay that cost. And then the standard 500 GP diamond I would just purchase.
Very good. You hired out an adventuring party known as the Pesky Roaches in order to travel into the chasm, and most of them returned, though fortunately bearing your ruin-touched diamond.
First thing I would do is I would probably start with Snervain. I don't know, bringing him as a combatant makes sense, but to start with him in terms of items, weaponry, things that would be helpful, and to also start closing the loop on that.
So, as you take your leave of King Brunor and begin to make your preparations, you find Snervain, where you first saw him, in fact, hammering over that forge within Kondrakar, next to the swiftly flowing river, the sounds of the waterfall roaring behind you. Between that and the ringing of hammers upon steel, you practically have to shout to be heard. Yet, as he approaches you, he says, "If it is blades or arms you seek, then you'll have them from me. But you already bear my masterwork across your back, and you bear steel befit for a king of dwarves upon your body. What is it you would ask of me?"
Illithid's corporeal form are soft, pliable. It's not necessarily damage that I need. It's protection, magical, of the mind. How hard is it to protect one through armor against some of their mind control?
Give me a second to look something up real quick. He says, "Difficult, though it is a task that I have given some consideration to of late." He takes you over to a nearby forge. where you can see that still unassembled, the plating having been forged. Looking almost, as you look down at it, this silvery black steel whirls upon it, almost like Damascus, but more akin to fingerprints that have been placed at conflicting angles, overlapping with each other. Tiny grooves, giving the entire thing an alien expression. He says, "Illithid steel, if you can call it that. Though, I hate to use such a word. It isn't even magnetic. What it is, though, we've been learning to rework for ourselves, though not yet how to forge it." He says, "I've been angling toward an enchantment recently, though I haven't yet cracked it." He says, "I call it Mind Carapace armor. Wouldn't offer you the same protection against blades and blows that suit you currently bear does. Yet, I think it may be able to repel some of the intrusions upon the mind that their kind are like to make."
Nodding. I can't imagine. I say this hesitantly, that they're going to hit with the same ferocious physical impact that this armor has seen from dragons and owners of entire dwarven castles have hit me with. So I think I would give up a little of my own personal protection to not get sick in the mind from one of these mind flayers.
He laughs and says, "I would hope not. If the bloody Illithid have a brain eater in their colony, a bloody dragon thrall, well, may as well pack this whole expedition up now, don't you think?"
I think if they had a sledgehammer big enough to kick in the doors of Miria's temple, something physically imposing, I think they would have attempted it by now. I think
nods.
What finds them at this I think that's what finds them at this impasse, and I think that's their hope for me. I'm just a big enough sledgehammer to kick their door in.
Forge, hammer lad. Don't sell yourself short. There's precision in the way you work, I've seen it. Whatever that drow elf bitch may say. Aye. Well, it'd be a rush job, but with a dab hand or two to assist me, as he nods meaningfully toward you, perhaps we could finish up the enchantment before it's time for you to set out. He says, "Seek me out when you're ready to put some honest work in, aye? Attend to the rest of your preparations. You'll know where to find me."
Nodding. Before leaving, real quickly, I will turn to him and pull out the star metal bands and thank him. I've got to be honest with you. These have held dragons. These have held wyvern. This may be the peak of... As strong as this sword is, these bands might have gotten me out as much as this sword has.
He looks toward you with an uncomfortable expression. And he says, "Aye. I'd hoped to see bands like those turn to some good service in my lifetime. I'm proud to hear there have been. On that subject, that object of interest that I sent you to retrieve, please tell me you were successful."
Pulling both of the diamonds out of my pocket, Irving, you have yet to tell me what these are for, only that you need them. A man like you has access to a lot, so I am very confused as to why. A messenger, an assistant, an apprentice. Shoot. One of Brunor's family directly didn't go get you, that you needed me for.
He looks toward you, looking throughout the chamber. Your voice is thankfully muffled by the cacophony around you. Make a persuasion check.
Hey, first dice roll of the new campaign.
With a 15, he pauses for a moment and says, "My liege lord, King Battlehammer, there's an obsession that burns within him. One that burns hotter than perhaps it should in any decent dwarf." He looks toward the forge in front of him and says, "I've given much in the pursuit of my people's culture. You've seen what I've given, at least a small portion of it. You were there," he says. "Brunor, though," and he turns to you with a cutting look, very meaningfully, and says, "If he would ally with the ancient foes of our people, the Drow elves, do you think that is the only fell alliance he would make? The only treasure he would offer if it meant the reclamation of Gauntylgrym?"
To bring power and honor back to your people, our people, I would imagine in a way there's probably not a deal that I wouldn't make. I've gotten this far betting on myself, and with the help of friends like yourself, I stand here after all of them.
Aye. Perhaps the only true ally that we have in this fight. I am no craftsman, you understand. I earn the title Smith Saint, for a piece of my soul is put into each thing that is wrought from steel by my hand. Yet, should my king command me in commission, how may I refuse? I say too much already. My words straddle the lines of treachery. Yet, I would beg you to consider, as he looks meaningfully again to the bands of star metal in your possession. You've seen what those can bind, and you have used them to bind only that which should be chained," he says. "Yet, think, Dawn Forger, of all the villains you have met. How many of them would set in shackles something innocent? How many of them would cast chains upon that which do not deserve to bear them?"
Giving Snurvane a uncomfortable look for a second. I thought only one person's set to make chains.
He glowers toward you, the forge light reflected in his gray face. "Name them."
The ones I thought were making chains the last time were the previous Tyranvals. That's why you were borrowed.
"Nay. Blessedly House Tyrannval knows not of this commission, he says. Yet, tell me, can you think of one that hoards information as a dragon does gold? That deals with pen more readily and more bloodily than sword? The drow may deal in bonds of silk, yet can you think of one who deals with bonds of iron? Bruenor would not tell me his name, yet I knew it. I knew it the moment that he spoke of the project. With whose influence should a mighty king of old Delzoun kneel to bargain with?
Is this something I could roll an insight check for? Adriel at this
sure
point would
can.
only be thinking like a god level creature, right? Like in his interactions, he's dealt with Malik, he's dealt with Miria's sister. So this is getting up there to where he's like, well, I guess the most evil person I've really kind of dealt with is the Neverwinter guy.
Aye. Neverember.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it is not him that I fear. Certainly there is a human malice, in a human-sized heart, a will to dominion. That is not what I fear. I fear that thing that rides him. I fear the one being that exerts influence over the Lord Protector. I make chains for prisoners, you understand, not for slaves.
Adriel doesn't know who controls Neverember yet, besides an Aboleth. Potentially.
He looks toward you and says, Aye, and think. And the histories of the Illithid, what is the one creature that their race fears? The ones who once enslaved them.
Githyanki?
He face palms and says,
Bro, we're hitting the edge of like my D&D lore where my brain just like, who the fuck?
So make a history check. You can do so with advantage, as Snurvane's going to help you out here.
Oh, an 8. That's garbage. Insight 20. History 8. Where,
That's fair.
I know he's trying to hit to somebody.
So Snurvane would describe to you in brief terms, as he's a little bit fuzzy on the subject as well, but the Illithid, the reason that they came to the Forgotten Realms in the first place from the depths of realm space is that their entire race were once enslaved by the Aboleths. The Mind Flayers in turn enslaved Githyanki. Githyanki in turn enslave any that they can. He says, and do you see? The links in a shackle. The links in a chain. We do not yet see the hand that wishes to hold it. Yet it is not a tool that should be forged. For any purpose. It shames me to say, I do believe that our great liege would trade the freedom of each other race that walks this earth if it meant the reclamation of his people's glory.
Sadly, Snurvane, the further I get into adventure the more I meet people along this path, the more I'm starting to believe that if there is power involved, everybody would trade everything they hold dear.
He snorts with laughter, returns to hammering upon an ingot nearby, almost as if a method of self-soothing, and says,
Well, you said it yourself, you great blithering idiot. You're not right in the head, why should any of the rest of them be?
It's safe for me to be not right in the head when I have armor that you've made.
Aye, and that's why I made it. Hopefully, all you power-hungry idiots will sort each other out someday. Leave the rest of us common folk to live our lives in peace, yet I don't see such a thing coming any time soon. And so,
he gestures toward Kandrakar beyond and says,
I serve my people, and the power-hungry fools who we've chosen to lead us.
And for the near future, I will too, until we figure out where this power grab is coming from, and hopefully there's enough people like you, me, Namira, that when we figure out why it's going south, we have the ability to amend that problem as well.
He turns the ingot over, begins to hammer the other side, and says,
Namira, my granddaughter is a fine lass, but loyalty clouds her judgment. I pray that you have not shared, nor will you, a word of which we've discussed with her.
Not at all. Her instability is what makes her such an asset in combat. I won't aim to change her ability to channel that. That is for sure.
Aye. Her creed is to her king and to her people.
He looks toward the forge and he says,
Mine is to the steel that I work. I ask you, have you considered, as he continues to ting, ting, ting away with an increasing intensity, why does King Brunor seek the forges of Gauntylgrym? I will share with you a shame that you should not repeat, but he is no smith himself. What does he understand of the song of steel and the service it may make to flesh?
Nodding. As I said, I think diplomats find themselves in positions or generals without understanding their people. He's passionate. He fights for dwarves. He probably is well influenced by power, but...
Aye, power.
He looks toward the sword that you bear on your back, and he says,
You bear a kingly blade. A blade that was intended to be gifted to the man you now serve. Yet,
he turns one eye toward you and says,
It is you that I wish to see bear it.
He says,
When it comes time to reclaim the forges of Gauntylgrym, to light them again, to bind the primordial into slavery a second time, will you do so for his sake, or your own? I will remind you of something, Dawn Forger. The purpose of this,
as he gestures toward the forge before him,
is not for the strong. The strong have their own strength, their own will to dominion. The secrets of the forge are for the weak. and the act of steelcraft is an act of mercy, that the weak may overcome the strong. I ask you, among whose number do you count yourself? For whose sake do you bear the steel that I gave birth to?
Looking at Snurvane, I don't bear the steel for myself. I may be able to wield it, but I don't wield it for myself. And do I bear it for Brunor? No. Well, he is a king that has protected many a dwarf. I don't think that anybody should have all of that power. I bear it for the dwarves who sit in the mountain, who sit scared when the fires go out, who are dealing with the difficulties of of survival, of existing, living in a mountain, living for labor, to swing that hammer, to do the work necessary. We put in so much effort, and when I swing that sword, when I attempt to relight that fire, Brunor may be able to have songs written about him for it. That's fine. The story of the mountain will exist, and that is great. But when other smiths and leather crafters, woodworkers, any dwarves who find themselves within the mountain capable of feeding their families stand close to those fires again, that's why I'm going to swing that sword.
Aye. And when the sword is swung, when the primordial is vanquished, when the flames are relit, into whose stewardship shall I pass? The stewardship of the strong or of the weak? I can swing a hammer, yet I cannot swing a blade. Should the kings of this land be tyrants or craftsmen?
Looking at Snurvane, the primordial vanquished in us, dealing with a more peaceful existence and hope. We both know there's an understanding that when you vanquish one villain, another stands up. And if it is different general, then that will be handled. If it is Brunor, I would like to believe my allegiance means he won't become the next villain across our lands, but if he is, as I will be hunting an Elderbrain, as I hunted a dragon, as I hunted spiders, I will tie another red rope around my idol when I would vanquish Brunor the same way I would vanquish anything else. No person, no dwarf is bigger than the whole. And I will not let control of those fires become a reason that they are.
He continues to hammer away in silence for a moment and says,
I will not speak treachery. I have spoken none. I simply wish to remind you that it is a kingly blade that you bear. That Gauntylgrym is a kingly seat. And I find myself worried about who shall claim it, a king of dwarves or a king of smiths.
I will make sure that when we get to that point, when we cross that path, Snurvane, I will make sure that it finds itself in the hands of dwarfs looking out for the future of all of us.
Perhaps you do not deserve that blade that rests upon your back. Yet I trust that it will find its way into the hands of one who does, someday. Leave me. I have work to do. If you wish to stand before the forge with me, you may return. But of this I can speak no more without offering treachery from my tongue.
This is nerve-wracking. I will nod to him and...
Make an insight check if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, you had to start this fucking off hot.
Doing my best.
Oh,
shit. With a natural 20, his words are clear. Brunor may be a noble man, an honorable man, but like you yourself said, any of those who reach a station like he does, any of those who reach a station such as yourself, you are mad with a love for power. Mad in the same way that Lord Neverember, in the same way that the Abolithic sovereignty, in the same way that Malik himself was for power. You bear upon your back a kingly blade. You seek to reclaim a kingly seat. You can practically hear Snurvane asking you, why should you not sit it yourself?
Bro, what? Oh, we're starting with the flamethrower. I like it. Okay, cool. Casual. You should usurp the king. I like it. Just just starting on a Monday, or whatever the Faeronian Monday is. In character, Adriel understanding the question does a couple things. First, I'm going to say there is genuine conflict here. Adriel's family has been the dwarfs, and outside of that, the level of acceptance he's experienced has always been to abuse his power. The group he's adventured with has accepted him, and the power has been shared, and it has been kind. This is the first truly external person who has looked at me and not had something to philosophically immediately gain. This did not seem, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, it did not seem to Adriel that this was controlling in a way. Like this wasn't self-serving to him in a I'm gonna be more powerful kind of way. Like it did not come across as such. So for Adriel, there is now a genuine conflict moment of someone has looked at him and said, in so many words, hey, why not you?
Not only that, he's telling you, if not you, then another like Brunor, another like Lord Neverember, and another, and another, and another, and when will you stop taking heads? When the blade of a king has been transformed into the blade of an executioner? Or when it finally falls from your grip in failure?
Bro. Just above the table. Really, you really are starting this out hot. And he is, no under certain terms, insinuated that there is nuanced want for the current king of the dwarves to want those fires back on. And it is not as kindly PC as I would like to believe.
You said it yourself. All of those who reach this point have a mad lust for power. It manifests in different ways. But that's truly what motivates them. King Brunor may be a hero. He may be the good, aligned champion that he's always been purported to be, yet adventurers are not smiths. Snurvane himself, as a smith saint, holds holy the craft above all else. And as he said to you, King Brunor is willing to barter with Drow, barter with the Aboleth-controlled Lord Neverember, willing to command Snurvane to make, if I'm going to recall the words correctly from our previous campaign, the way he said it to you, I've made shackles for beasts, even a shackle for a god, yet a shackle for a city I shall never forge.
So now Adriel's in his little mental book is going, okay, this is not ideal. Only because Snurvane was willing to die for the cause, and even he is asking the question. So that strikes Adriel as I go through this adventure, as I bring down the Elder Brain, which will then help me, I guess, loop back around to putting this Primordial in its place. I need to be aware of the points in at which it's the power discs start slipping, when there becomes no friction between the give and take of power. If they start to slip, Adriel needs to be abundantly aware of who benefits from those slips as this continues.
Indeed. Yet, look at those around you. Myria Tirenfall, Brunor Battlehammer, Lord Neverember, even Karana, who comes and goes at your beck and call. Don't they all play this game much better than you do?
Agreed. They do very much
Particularly so. Better than an old man who has spent the past 400 years of his life standing in front of a forge, never concerning himself with such things.
Us. Adriel now nervous. Things are going well. He now has to think about...
We haven't even gotten to the first encounter yet.
I know. We need to start thinking about the things we need for the trek. I need to... started putting together a notes list of the type of people I need. And I know it's nerdy, but...
So, a couple recap on, organizational things. Myria's told you that she is going to be returning to the Temple of the Spider in 24 hours.
Affirmative.
Snurvane said that if you wish to come put in a day's labor on this armor, which you would know to be about 8 hours, you're welcome to. You've been recommended to find a powerful arcanist, and though Myria has offered to transport you to the Temple of the Spider herself, you may perhaps seek other means of passage. So the breadth and the width and the depth of your preparations here really is entirely up to you. There's no time limit on this task, but it already seems that at least a couple entities are attempting to pull you into it quickly.
I have a basic structure of a group of people that I would want to bring. I got to find out who those people are, and if I know them specifically. It would benefit me to get the ride from Miriam, just because combat is combat is combat. Minimizing the consumption of goods along the way is something I've learned is worth its weight in gold.
Worth its weight in spell slots, but yeah.
But theoretically, I would get along. Everybody survives to Myria's. I will get a long rest there. So there is a weird trade-off that is outside of potions and things I would acquire, purchase, get ready with. Truthfully, my big issue will be post her temple, but pre her temple, minimal friction is great. So there's that. Working with Snurvane to get something that would minimize my brain control would be high on that list of priorities, just knowing what is coming. But I think the party's first. I think the armor's second. And I need to see if I can get the party together before she goes to her temple. And then if I can't, then I have the extra time to... If I don't get the party together and the goods together, then I'm walking and it's fine. If I can get them together, then I get the free ride.
Korana, who has been listening to this and, of course, shares your thoughts, whispers in your ear and says, "Though the Lady Tiranval does offer one opportunity for transit, there are others. Indeed, most recently your dearly departed assassin, Leandrin, made a visit to that same place on my behalf. We found our own means of translocation. I'm certain that you are equal to her mettle. The city of Neverwinter, though occupied as it is by our foes, is a wealth of resources. I would remind you of that hastily given handshake that I once took, and I would beg you not to make the same mistake twice."
Okay. Alright, okay. So that does make the most sense. Going to Neverwinter is going to have the most bodies per square foot. So I'm probably going to find the most adventurers there. If I stay in Conduit or Car, all my adventurers are going to be dwarves.
And somewhat limited in terms of the supply.
Yep.
Namira, of course, as a Forge Fist, you're almost certain that she would be willing to join you on a task like this if you asked. You're almost certain that King Brunor would be willing to release her from service in order to do so. Maybe Snurvane, if you could convince the old man to step away from his labor long enough, would be willing to see you and his granddaughter through the deeps. Yet, your resources here are limited.
It sounds like that is truly, you are correct. You are correct. Korana's philosophical idea is correct. The best thing for me to do is probably travel to Neverwinter. I understand that some of our villains are there. All of some people who would like to see us not doing well would prefer, for you know what I mean, like. But I also am hoping that there will be. I have to weigh the inherent risk with the inherent benefit, which is there's going to be better magic, people, like it's just going to be better all over. So I'm going to have to turn down Miria's offer to go to Neverwinter. That does make the most sense.
Do you seek Miria out next, or?
I would go to Miria next.
Very good. As your heavily plated fist resounds upon the door of her private chamber, after a moment you see a grim-faced drow, a pair of short blades set into the holsters at his hips, clad all in drowcraft leather, most notably his mouth stitched shut, looks toward you with a flash of angry eyes. You can see Miria behind, within the room, poring over some very old-looking book. She looks up toward you, shuts it, and says, Zunre, this one is known to me. He may enter my presence. The drow looks you up and down, as though inspecting for treachery himself, before stepping back and leaning into the corner. She looks toward you and says, You'll have to forgive my bodyguard, Adriel. He has only my best interests at heart. As to you, I'm certain. You've come quickly, though. Are your preparations complete?
Looking at Miria, I would respond. While I do love the people I grew up with, it occurs to me that I'm not going to find the items, the compatriots, co-conspirators that I need to pull this off inside the mountain. So I need to go to Neverwinter and begin to amass what is necessary to do this.
Make an insight check. Let me roll a deception check on her behalf. Gonna roll that to GM.
I like it.
As you say that, you cannot help but note a momentary flash of fear upon her face. Practiced, well controlled. She speaks, there's not a tremor of it in her voice, but she says, Neverwinter, indeed. That is a trek of many days, and many days to return to Kandrakar. Whatever resources you are in need of, House Tirinval may be able to supply, not to an agent of King Brunor, but to an ally, such as yourself. I must depart by the eve of this day. If I linger here any longer, I am certain that my rivals will have found a means by which to unseat me by the time I return. Are you entirely certain that such a thing is necessary? Karana whispers in your ear, working off that 13 insight check, and says, I suspect that the condition of House Tirinval is greatly diminished. Much more than she's willing to let on.
Can I ask Miria with persuasion about the last she told me she was probably giving up Lolth and was going to become, I believe you called it untethered from a god.
Mm-hmm.
And she was going to report to her mother. Could I use my persuasion to attempt to unearth the direction that went? Trying to go off Karana's comment of the instability.
What exactly would you like to say to her?
I want to say, Miria, I remember last we spoke, one of the benefits that you were going to see from dealing with your sister the way you did was potentially reseeding a new...
She has another drow in the chamber with her, one who's apparently loyal to her, but still another drow of the Temple of the Spider.
Okay. Miria, how has seating a new leader to the temple, how has the seating of a new leader to the temple, I will say spider temple, I won't say temple of Lolth, I will avoid that word. How has seating a new leader into the spider temple gone?
No need for persuasion yet. She says, "You look upon her now. My conquest, if you wish to call it that, has been looked upon favorably by my dear mother my dear mother. For now, I occupy the seat at her whim and at her behest."
Is it still crawling with all the spiders I remember?
That's a good way to do this. Make a persuasion check using wisdom as the governing modifier, as you attempt to, not exactly to persuade her, but to convey this message subtly.
All right. So, one of my blue checks is on persuasion. So that's one of the skills that I have proficiency in.
Mm-hmm.
So
you've
this
got
is
a plus. Yeah.
So the difference between my charisma and wisdom is 1 point because our Wednesday game hasn't ended, so you haven't let me move 1 out of wisdom into charisma. So I benefit today. So this roll will just be 1 point less because the difference between 3 and 2 is just 1. 8. Doesn't matter.
With a 9, it doesn't appear that she quite picks up on it. She says, "The children of Lolth are as ever present within her dominion. Why? Did you think that we had fed someone you know to them?"
I would look at her trying to use kind of my last subtle idea here and say, I just wondered if you found a better home for that big jade spider that put my friend in a sword.
Sure, make one more persuasion check. Same modifier. With a 23, it appears to click. She pauses and says, "Zulre, leave us for the moment. Our dear friend wishes to ask impudent questions, and he is valuable to us. I would not see your blades drawn in haste." He pauses for a moment, looking at her, raising an eyebrow questioningly, and she says, "Do not make me repeat myself, thrall." He stiffens up and exits the room. You find yourselves alone, other than Karana's ethereal presence, and she says, "Speak plainly. If you have come to me with threats, I am certain that you shall not find them reciprocated, yet dealt with all the same."
I would respond honestly with a lot of kindness and say, no, this is no threat. I remember the turmoil that removing your sister caused you, and I know too all well about the unseated nature of dealing with a god you may not trust the same. And I wanted to, as all good guys do, check to see. You were afraid you may dump Lolth as someone you follow. Does the temple still follow Lolth? Do you and Mother still follow Lolth?
Alright, this time make a straight persuasion check, using charisma as your modifier. With a natural 20, she pauses for a moment, steepling her fingers as she looks toward you, and says, "My dear mother departed the path of the web weaver some time ago, yet appearances must be kept up. She's proud of me, though not in the way that I had expected. It is not deception, betrayal, which she nor I hold in high esteem, but strength itself. A strength that is not obtained by the worship of a god, but by a pact with one.
Did you say a pact with a god?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean that's like exactly what Adriel would say.
Oh,
Did you say a pact with a god?
consider the futility of worship. To give one's heart, one's soul, one's daily activity to a being greater than themselves without any promise of recompense? No. My mother is far too willful a person for such a path. And as I have discovered, as am I, there are entities which might be bargained with. Very reasonably, I will add. I have learned that her strength is not entirely her own, nor is mine, as you will find me now. The temple of the spider still recites its prayers to the web weaver. The offerings are made, yet the true purpose is kept hidden. House Tyranval's ambitions are their own. We owe no loyalty to any god, no loyalty to any being, yet there are bargains that must be upheld.
Well, this is just peeling back Adriel's scalp at every fucking turn, isn't it? Okay, so it may be a little imprudent, but Adriel will ask, whom is this new god that you, instead of worship, now do business with?
She says, "Speak not of her as a god. To do so would cause offense."
She, okay. Whom
My
is
mother
she?
has... Mhm.
Whom is
She goes on. She says, "My mother has dealt truthfully with me. I shall deal truthfully with you. The story is an old one, though not particularly long." She says, "House Tyranval claimed its nobility some 500 years ago. My mother was but a humble soldier in service of the Queen of Spiders. That dominion, the one which you so ably invaded, the Temple of the Spider, was at one point under the control of Dweragar, children of Gauntylgrym. Gauntylgrym passed. They took it from us, raised an army, a crusade, I suppose you could say, intending to rout out and destroy the most loyal followers of Lolth. Yet, capricious goddess as she is, I must assume that she took some joy in the act, perhaps had a hand in it herself. Thousands of drow fell in the defense of the temple.
My mother would have been one of them. One of Lolth's elite, one of her most treasured children, yet a spider devours its young. She found herself within the inner sanctum. She fought as the doors were breached, as the steel-clad dwarves swarmed over them, the final defender of Lolth's pride. And she speaks of it with a venom equal to the Spider Mother herself. Consider devoting yourself so entirely to one who hates you, to a mother whose only joy is to watch her children suffer and perish in their service. She prayed, she sought a miracle, yet it fell upon deaf ears. She has spoken to me of the emptiness with which she was greeted, the silence with which Lolth responded to her. Yet a prayer unanswered is heard by all the world. A being came to her, a mother of another kind, offering power, offering survival, offering an ambition suited to House Tyrannval. Betrayals were made within the Temple of the Spider on this day. Betrayals of word, betrayals of thought, betrayals of deed. And as Miria says that, you can feel Karana's claw tightening upon your shoulder in fear. She says, "My mother made a pact with a queen of demons, offering her power, offering her beauty, offering her a perfection of body. She is herself a martial force to be reckoned with, yet supplemented by the blessings of Malkinthet, she poses a threat to all Minzo Baranzan. I now walk the same path. I wish to see House Tyrannval rise above the crushed corpses of all the children of Lolth. Does that answer you?
I should have taken better notes. Yes, it does answer me.
Do you have questions?
I just
Above table, if you have an issue with your notes.
I just scrolled back through all that, and I don't think I got a name.
She says that her mother, during the siege of the Temple of the Spider, when she was the sole survivor,
She made a deal
against a Dwaragar crusade, made a deal with not a mother of spiders, but a mother of demons.
Oh,
A creature that came to her, asking
Son of a
her to
bitch.
make the betrayals of
That's
word,
why I was
thought, and
confused.
deed.
This mother bitch. Oh,
And
I know who
Zunrei,
that
and
is.
Zunrei Tyrannval, in addition to her daughter Miria Tyrannval, both now, well, worship is maybe the wrong word, but are involved in a pact with Malkinthet.
Fucking, of course. Yeah, why wouldn't they be? Who isn't right now? Honestly, everybody just should hang out with them. That's so good. It's so great. I'm so thrilled about this. Okay, so
You hear Karana's voice in your ear. Adriel, I have asked little of you. Nothing but the promise of your service. And in this moment, I beg of you to fulfill it. Strike
her down.
Feel like comedically above table, Adriel's gonna flip out like a little pocketbook and just go, Elder Brain, Primordial, Demon Queen. Like, it's like the world's most morbid to-do list. Like, to do. Kill Brain. Kill Primordial. Kill God. Nap. Jazzercise. Like, just staring down at this and going, sure, put it on my tab. Honestly, why not? You know what I mean? There's that moment where it's okay, sure, yeah, no, yeah, of course.
She continues to whisper in your ear. She says, if my mother's influence is at hand in this, there is no way that we could possibly hope to sort truth from lie, fact from fiction. Strike her down. Let us be done with this.
One thing
There's nothing to be...
One thing Adriel will say is she's, I would assume, pretty heavily tuned up about hearing this.
Yes.
Adriel has a, what I would say, not unreasonable fear of her mother to a point. Because of the wild and realistic control that she can perform. Correct? Like, she... it's the same conversation I had. Adriel has had the ability to swing sword, and the primordial sounds dangerous, but Adriel believes that the steel is strong, right? Like, it's almost a cult. Dwarvism is almost the Hale Bopp Comet Society. We're going to continue sipping that Kool-Aid, eating that applesauce, and wearing our Jordans because the hammer's strong, right? Like, we're going to keep laser focused on that cult. The only thing that could get us is our pea-sized brains. And the Aboleth is dicey. At this point, the Aboleth was dicey. Now it's Mind Flayers and a Demon Queen who is a professional at convincing things. So there is still just a okay, like, this needs to be done. And the oath of vengeance inside of Adriel is she's now become the biggest evil, right? Like, he's got the weird... God, Oath of Vengeance paladins really do verge on serial killers.
You really have no idea in what way her hand may be, if at all, in any of what has been happening upon the Sword Coast. You just know that Karana has a grudge against the being Malkinthat that spawned her and has a great terror of this person. You've also seen Nazugan's attempts to summon her, which have resulted in failure thus far. But beyond that, I don't think that you know anything about Malkinthat's interactions with the Sword Coast, if there even are any.
Yeah, so I have seen her in, like, a bathing suit-esque photo shoot. Right? Like, Nazugan having her Miss September posters on the wall. He's got the Claudia Schiffer version of Malkinthat. But I do also understand that part of Nazugan's original programming was the Tyrant King. So while I understand he had her on the wall, Adriel above table would not know if friendly neighborhood beholder Nazugan wanted to pipe her down, or unfriendly Tyrant King thought that their union would bring power.
You remember in Nazugan's diary, he talked extensively about how if he could have the charms of a succubus.
Yeah, he was, and that he never really fleshed out if that was for positive or negative, right? Like, that's the whole thing. Like, that's the only part that I don't have. So there's just enough terror from her and around the dressings of her that I go, well, this is wildly nerve-wracking. So putting her on the list of people that have got to go, Adriel does kind of quietly and nods and says, okay, this is another person who's got to catch these hands. And deals with that thought and moves on a little bit, I guess.
Miria looks toward you and says, "Do you have something else to speak about, or did you simply come to interrogate me about my religious beliefs?"
I am going to do the interesting here. And I know this could come back to hurt me, but I'm also hoping it comes back to benefit me. It's the coin flip. Miria, I need, as from your mouth, a prodigious arcanist. And of wizards and sorcerers and artificers that I have seen, that I have come across, few wield the sharp tongue and the prolific arcane might as you, someone who was at death's doorstep still tearing a room apart with very little effort. Do you have someone you're willing to lend me for this journey through the Mind Flayers?
Make a persuasion check.
You have done too much, Ben, in terms of giving me the ability now to say, can't have what you don't ask for, and sometimes you just got to let the flavor and the adventure go. This is one of these moments where, should I have someone from a Drow Temple come with me? TBD. But they'll be able to navigate the Underdark a little better than I would.
Miria looks toward you with consideration for a moment and says, "The project is still in its infancy, but some field testing could be useful." She says, "Yes, I believe I know an arcanist, one with whom you are familiar.
Better
And
not
at
be
my
that
command, she
spider.
would accompany you. I believe that you are acquainted with my dear sister, Elizel."
I'm going to ask the question here, Miria. The one that we murdered in cold blood?
"Oh, yes. But the body was left quite intact."
I didn't see a refrigerator in that temple. Do you just have was Varnick stacked with her? Adriel just kind of like coursing through his mind going, I don't remember. I guess we didn't go through a lot. There may have been a morgue or some kind of, there must be a lot more to that temple than I realized.
In a temple so overstuffed with clerics, a peaceful repose is not difficult to obtain. I assure you, her body and the body of your Furbolg companion are both well intact, though hers is significantly more lively than his at the moment.
I nod and say, can Elizel be trusted?
As a person, certainly not. As a construct, under my command, well, my magics have advanced greatly in their practice as of late. I would be fain to see them tested.
Yeah, all right. Okay. I will test the magic you have coursing through Elizel to bring with us along this task. I may not know a lot about the Underdark, and dwarf-drow relations have been better. But in this task, I would imagine there is very few more passionate about it than drow who have been directly affected by them.
Indeed. If an arcanist you wish, you shall have it. In whatever condition I find her. If you have further preparations to make, I beg of you to make them quickly. I must leave this evening, and I believe it would be preferable for all involved for you to accompany me when I do so.
I nod. Karan and I have already spoke about how it just makes more sense to take the time to go to Neverwinter. So, hearing that, nodding, saying, okay, we are going to attempt to be prepared. However, I do think that we're going to end up arming, equipping, going to Neverwinter to make some of our final adjustments. There isn't much in the way of magic or potions in this well-constructed hall.
If those are the preparations necessary, then I shall not detain you. I ask simply that you make haste.
So, I nod, and I believe that will conclude my conversations with Viria.
Very good. Adriel, as you step from her room, the mute-mouthed drow bodyguard waiting impatiently outside the door, glaring at you as you step past, the ringing of hammers echoes in your ear once again, incessant, constantly beating, just as surely as the ambitions within the breasts of those that you have dealt with on this day. As the path begins to splay out before you, Neverwinter, the Temple of the Spider, the home of the Elder Brain itself, you know that it will be beset on all sides with foes. Your loyalties tested in each conversation. And yet, as you feel the weight of the blade upon your back, you know that another option is available to you. Loyalty only to self and to steel. As you move back into the tunnels of Kandrakar, the weight of these thoughts whispering in your mind like the words of the dead. I think that we'll end the session here for the week.
I'm erect. I don't know. This is going to be a barn burner. I'm going to tell you what, this is going to cook. This...
Yep.
It's so dope. It's so dangerous. It's so dope. It is... I didn't think you were going to cook this angle. That's for sure. I knew you were...
What, you thought it was going to be a simple trek into Gauntylgrym and fight
No.
and
So here's the thing. I know it's never face value, but did I think I would have the Master Smith from the King of the Dwarfs telling me that, hey, something stinks about the King of the Dwarfs, and then find out that Miria's mother is in bed with Karana's mom? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, one, this is starting to be like everybody. Did you ever work retail, or did you ever work like as a waiter?
Oh, yeah.
One of those jobs where like everybody seems to fuck
Both.
everybody.
Yeah.
And you just want to sit down and be like, okay, can we all stop going to Malkath? Like, can we just fucking agree not like? Can we be out on this one? Can she never be that person again for everybody? Like, there's just that 3 or 4 times where it's like, okay, this is getting hot. Malkinth ending, dealing with an avatar, however, Malkithet would be, is phenomenal storyline. Adriel looking at if Brunor's a sack of shit. To your point, yeah, I guess at some point Adriel would. So I guess I never thought of it, but would start to get pressed. Hey, if you do enough saving of the dwarves, people are going to want to support you, which isn't something that would be necessarily at this point something that he wants, but it sure isn't something that he had ever considered either. So now there is layers to the madness that I am just laughing about. We rolled a couple dice, there was absolutely no maps or bullshit, and it was amazing. What a fucking week.
Hopefully that's a good nightcap for your
Hell
absolute
yeah.
shit day.
Oh my god, are you fucking kidding me? I'm telling you, Wednesday's group has decided some of the role plays and shit you've been throwing at us are just, they're cooking so hard. It's just so delicious when we're starting to look at each other and find out shit and be like, oh fuck, wait, what? You said who? You said what? So we are absolutely steaming now. I love this. How much do I owe you?